So welcome to the Environment Committee meeting. I'm Edith Macra, Environment Director for the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus, and I am filling in for our Chairman, Mayor Kevin Burns, who is on the road today. And I will be doing introductions, and Cheryl is aptly managing the conversation and the slides. So we got these coming on Saturday. That's great. Everyone knows how Zoom works for sure, but I'll just get started here. Please use the chat feature for questions. We do have time for that. We've got three speakers today and topics that are somewhat related and then complementary. So starting up first, there's the three topics I'm sure you know are the new SolSmart program. We're looking at renewable energy siting policies and issues. And then we've got a really neat opportunity to learn about a new initiative to help municipalities with ESG reporting and planning. And so I'll do a brief introduction to each speaker or group of speakers separately. And first up, we'll look at the new SolSmart program, right? Yep, the new SolSmart program. So many of you know the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus was very active in the SolSmart program. We started working with Brian Ross, who's one of our speakers today, a long time ago in the village of Schaumburg, considering what we could do on solar codes and policies. We had help from the EPA to begin to try to tackle the local government influence and support for growing the solar industry. And then we met the SolSmart program that got launched, and we had great success with that. As you probably know, because we brag about it a lot, is Illinois has more SolSmart designated communities than anybody, including California, Colorado, and the very sunny state of Florida. And Minnesota keeps trying to catch up with us. But we've had a role in helping communities through in a cohort fashion. We've done that 2 times on contract, and the third time just to work with the SolSmart program as a partner. The program is now relaunching, so it is new and improved, and we're really thrilled to be a part of the just to be an advocate for the program. Both myself, Brian, and Martha Dooley from Schaumburg, we're all on the technical advisory committee for developing the new SolSmart program. So first up, we've got Val Stori and Sydne to tell us about the new SolSmart program. Val Stori is a colleague. She's the senior program manager at the Great Plains Institute, which is a really important partner for us. And I hope they'll do a little introduction to that organization. Val brings over 20 years of experience in national clean energy policy and natural resource management. She's got a BA from Middlebury College, which we have a very strong Middlebury College contingent here. Please identify yourself in the chat if you wish. So you'll find some colleagues on our environment committee from the Middlebury College. So Master's of Studies in Environmental Law from Vermont Law School, and in her free time loves running in the mountains and cooking. Sydne Tursky is a program associate at GPI, Great Plains Institute, where she supports work to resolve the sticky issues that plague renewable energy deployment, like siting and zoning problems. Sydne holds a master's in environmental studies from Western Washington University, and her master's thesis explored how creative policy framing may be used to increase Southern evangelical Christian support of climate policy. So happy to turn it over to Val and Sydne.
Hello, let me pull up our slides.
Great. While Sydne is doing that, thanks for having us, everyone. I am Val, and I'll just give you a 2-minute description of Great Plains Institute for those of you who are unfamiliar with it. We are a nonprofit based in Minneapolis, and we work broadly to transform the energy system or energy systems, and we do so in a way that benefits the economy, the environment, and people. And we like to do this transformation by engaging communities. So what we like to do is bring the right people together to the table to find solutions for moving forward on decarbonization efforts. Sydne and I sit on the Renewable Energy Program team. We have 5 teams across GPI. I won't go into them all to save us some time, but you can find more about us at betterenergy.org. That's GPI's website. name. But today we are here to talk about SolSmart, and I'm going to pass it over to Sydney to give you an introduction to the program.
Sure. Hello. So let's just start with what is SolSmart. It's a national designation and technical assistance program. SolSmart helps governments make it faster, easier, and more affordable for residents to install solar. The goal is to cut down on red tape, make sure that applications for permitting for distributed solar are better so that staff time is reduced in going through those applications. The goal is to help communities achieve climate and energy goals by expanding that renewable energy deployment. It's all around just designed to make distributed solar, so solar on rooftops, solar in backyards, easier, a smoother process, and make it so that anyone who wants to apply for a permit can do so, and it's a simple and easy process for everyone. So achieving a SolSmart designation recognizes that communities have taken those key steps to address local barriers to solar energy. And it also signals that a community is open for solar business. So that's attractive to solar companies who know that there's not going to be a lot of red tape to leap through to get solar built. To get SolSmart designation, the program offers no cost technical assistance. So that's free help for things like writing new ordinances and dealing with all the kind of permitting things, updating websites, help with figuring out how to make this process really smooth and easy. So as Edith said, Illinois has a big SolSmart presence. There are 59 communities in Illinois that have SolSmart designation, and most of them are gold, which is, well, not most of them, but more of them are gold than any other designation. And that's huge, that's pretty rare. And a lot of communities in Illinois just find that this has helped. SolSmart helps reduce utility bills for people because they're able to install solar energy. It increases transparency, so everyone knows what's going on. And again, just reducing those barriers to installing solar. There are 3 different pathways for a community to achieve SolSmart designation, and I will talk more about what designation means in just a moment. But there's the standard pathway, which is what most communities go through. It's the standard way. It's the most straightforward way, I think. For communities, maybe a county or in some states, smaller than a county, they might need to take the modified pathway because they do not control permitting or zoning or inspection or something else like that. That is what a lot of the criteria to designation in SolSmart is related to. So if a community doesn't control those things, we do have a way to still get to designation. There's also a regional organization pathway for things like development commissions, metropolitan councils, things like that. And that's a little bit different as well, obviously, because it's not a municipality in the typical sense. So there's a path to any of these designation levels, no matter the structure of the community that we're talking about. And there's 4 different designation levels. They all build on each other. So to achieve silver, for instance, you have to have achieved bronze. To get platinum, you must have achieved gold, etc. And as you can see, they all require a different number of points. So bronze requires 60 points, silver is 100, gold is 200, and platinum, which is a brand new designation level, requires 350. And there are 5 different criteria categories to get those points, which Val will talk about later. And for the most part, communities get to kind of pick and choose which criteria they want to meet as long as they meet the prerequisites. And so that means that you have quite a bit of freedom in deciding what works for your community and what's going to help you reach the goals that you want to meet when it comes to solar deployment. For communities who decide they do want to pursue SolSmart designation, This graphic just shows you a few of the steps. So steps 1 through 3 are all about getting that initial information, completing a consultation call, reading the available resources to make sure you know what SolSmart is, what it can do, and what it requires. I will say one sort of ask is that communities who do want to go through the designation process, they do need to devote a little bit of staff time to it. The TA is available, but there will need to be someone working on this, of course. And so once a community decides that this is something they want to do, they can submit a written commitment, which is step 4. And that's just a public statement that says they are ready to start trying to pursue designation. Once they do that, they'll be connected with a technical assistance provider that helps them meet all the criteria to get there. Once they are done with that process, they can submit their application. Turnaround time is pretty fast, and usually TA providers do an excellent job at making sure your application is really strong and won't need to be resubmitted for any reason. And once it comes back clear, communities are designated. So that is the process. Val is going to talk about our criteria, and we had a poll slide that is mysteriously missing. So I guess we'll just skip that and I'll let Val take over to talk about the new criteria.
Sure. I believe the poll question was, are any of you considering SolSmart designation? And if so, we'd love to know. And if you could use the chat to indicate that, that would be helpful. So as Sydney mentioned, the technical assistance providers are the ones who review your town plan, your zoning criteria or ordinances to help you figure out what actions you could readily take to reach the designation level that you've indicated you would like to pursue. Some of you have, or I believe, have already achieved SolSmart designation and may be wishing to move up a level. And what you'll find is that there have been some changes made to the SolSmart criteria in the last year. So this is still the same SolSmart program that you may know, but over the last year, the IREC team, that's the Interstate Renewable Energy Council, and ICMA, the International Cities and Municipalities Association, I think the A is Association, GPI, and other technical assistance providers have been working on revising and updating the criteria. And we've added 18 new criteria in the standard pathway. Again, that's the pathway for local jurisdictions that do control zoning, have the regulatory authority to do so. And we've made changes or updates to some of the existing criteria. And the focus of these revisions, as well as the new criteria, is on 5 or 6 topical areas or action items. There has been a move to automate permitting. So if you can see in number 2, the first bullet, Solar App Plus is a DOE supported permitting and application process that is automated. So if a community were to automatically adopt Solar App Plus or a similar automated permitting system, for that is a platinum requirement, for example. There's also an additional focus on solar plus technologies. And here we're thinking about solar plus batteries, solar plus heat pumps, solar plus EV chargers. There's a renewed focus on codes and standards. So updating codes, model codes, etc. There is a renewed and updated focus on financing, especially making sure that there are finance options for low to moderate income residents. There is a big focus on metrics and data collection. That's a big difference from the first round of SolSmart. So we're really looking for communities to collect data on how many people have applied to install distributed solar, how many megawatts or kilowatts have been, kilowatt hours have been generated in your town, things like that. And then there are new DEI action items or criteria. There is the new platinum level. So in the past, you've been able to choose from bronze, silver, and gold. If you're a gold community and you're looking to level up, there is now the platinum pathway, and a prerequisite for the platinum designation level is the automated permitting system, the Solar App Plus. And then number 4, another significant change is that any of the criteria that are about training municipal staff, there's been a change from training them every 5 years to every 2 years. And there have also been updates to the program guide, which is linked in this slide, and we'll be sharing the slide deck with you. The program guide is an excellent resource. It walks you through all the different criteria, how many points you can get for each. And what I really like about the program guide is under each action item, there are examples from communities that have undertaken this action item. So you can see how the action item has been implemented in the real world, and there are also resources for each criteria. Next slide. So a few changes in the points. For bronze, silver, gold to platinum, it's 60, 100, 200, and 350 total points. There have also been changes to the number of prerequisite criteria that you need to accomplish to reach those designation levels. The prerequisite criteria are mostly in 2 buckets, in the permitting and zoning and planning and inspection criteria. The government operations, community engagement, and market development criteria are more the optional criteria, except that the platinum designation level does have some prerequisites in government operations and community engagement. Next slide. So I just want to quickly walk you through some of the prerequisite examples. In this chart, this brownish color is the bronze level, the gray is represents silver, and this bottom one, the PZ5, represents the gold designation level. And as you can see, some of the examples, the very basic step is a commitment from your local government that you're going to pursue designation, and then post an online checklist on your community website that's very easy for residents to access. There are training requirements that are prerequisites, training on best practices in permitting, training on best practices in inspection are some examples of prerequisites for silver. And then just quickly, one of the prerequisites for gold is to codify that in the zoning ordinance that rooftop solar is by right use, so that there's no conditional use permitting, etc. But solar PV is allowed by right in all major zones. Next slide. We're running low on time. Oh, look, Sydney,
I know it
your
migrated.
Mentimeter
Sorry.
poll has shown up. We'll skip that for now. Since we're running low on time, I just want to breeze through, I think, the next 5 slides in which I've put in examples of some of the new criteria by category. So this is permitting and inspection. And in bold, you can see some of the key focus areas. So some of the, as I talked about before, the key focus of the revisions and the new criteria are on LMI and DEI customers. So here, the first bullet, exempt or waive fees for residential solar for low to moderate income customers. Posting an online checklist. I think that's the 4th bullet. Sydney had talked about transparency. So one of the goals of SolSmart is to make sure that there's transparency and that information is readily and easily accessible by all. And then the last bullet there, demonstration of implementing an instant or automated platform, for example, the DOE's Solar App Plus. Next slide. Planning and zoning examples of criteria, sharing the solar PV progress. Again, transparency here to achieving targets or metrics, including specific large-scale solar PV goals, metrics, and strategies. Here, the focus is on metrics. And then the last bullet, again, that focus on LMI residents requiring new construction of affordable housing and multifamily housing to be solar ready. Apologies for breezing through all these. We will share the slide deck with you. Government operations, again, there are no prerequisites other than in the platinum designation level for government operations. This criteria topic is all about actions that the local government can take, for example, on its own facilities. The new criteria, you can see posting metrics, again, directly installing or providing technical or financial support to LMI residents for affordable housing, multifamily housing, etc. A new one, obtaining a community benefits agreement with a solar developer for solar installation. For those of you unfamiliar with community benefits agreements, it is an agreement that the community develops with the solar developer. So what additional benefits will the developer bring to the community that's hosting the solar installation? Next slide. Community engagement, as it sounds, it's really engaging the communities either in programs such as Solarize, which is a community-based bulk purchasing program for solar to reduce costs. Some of the new community engagement criteria are establishing partners with local community-based organizations. So there's your DEI action item. The second bullet, again, speaks to metrics, posting that online dashboard or summary of solar PV metrics for your community. I'm going to skip the third one and go to the next slide, which is on market development. And here the changes are really defining and implementing a specific pathway for LMI residents to participate in that Solarize or community-wide group purchasing program. And the language changed here. Before it was encouraging participation, and now it's defining and implementing a specific way for LMI residents to get involved in bulk purchase programs. Next slide. I think that's it for our slides. That's our contact information, and we are happy to take questions. And I think we have a question for you. So we are curious about, go ahead, Sydney.
Oh, I was just going to say there's a little number at the top here that you can plug into Mentimeter to answer this question for us, which would be excellent. We're wondering if anyone perceives a barrier to achieving SolSmart designation in your community.
Yes, so we would love to engage with Illinois again and help you retain your status as the leading state with the number of communities that have become SolSmart designated. We'd love to see some communities level up or new designations, and we're here to help. GPI's role in this round of SolSmart is as a community engagement partner and as a liaison. So we will bring you through that community engagement letter and then pass you off to the IREC ICMA team for technical assistance.
We have had another technical issue with the poll. My apologies.
If you wouldn't mind, put those slide questions back up and let's see if people want to answer in the chat, just or
Sure.
your thoughts off the top of your head on the barriers to SolSmart designation.
Yep. And Edith, I don't know if there's time for Q&A. We're happy to answer questions, or we're happy to just have folks email us or reach out.
Yeah, if you would, please put questions in the chat. We do have a couple of minutes. Any thoughts or feedback on the SolSmart program, particularly those of you who are looking to level up or participate for the first time? We did have a few communities enter in the chat that they are looking to either level up. So both River Forest and Elgin looking to level up, and Glenview looking to join for the first time.
That's terrific. Sorry, I think our Mentimeter poll is not working, but the question is, what are you perceiving as a major barrier to designation? Is it lack of staff capacity, for example, just not having enough time? Are there other barriers? Maybe your municipality doesn't have zoning authority. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, or take questions, or move on.
Last call for SolSmart questions. And thank you for recognizing our slightly competitive nature and wanting to retain our first in the nation status. So I would encourage our environment committee members and member municipalities to participate in the SolSmart program. It's been super helpful. And if those of you who are new to the program didn't realize it, but the SolSmart program was an inspiration for the EV readiness program, which we're now in deep on. So it's been super successful approach for municipalities.
Great, thank you. I will say that Minneapolis, the Met Council has hinted at friendly competition in taking over as lead in the number of designated communities. So there you have it.
Glenview, you can't. We got to coach you through. But really, it's been super helpful for communities of all sizes. So don't feel as if the work is intimidating or not achievable. You know, there's plenty of technical assistance, and I'd certainly like to see all communities participate in the program, get the recognition. You learn a lot, and speeds up processes. So that's the other thing, is internal benefits to communities. Okay, with that, thank you so much to Sydne and to Val for that presentation, and we will continue to share information about the SolSmart program and encourage participation. So next is a neat topic which I am looking forward to learning more about, and I'm happy to introduce Brian Ross, who's been a longtime friend to the Mayor's Caucus on a lot of our projects. And I apologize for misidentifying the blooms back behind you. They are not daisies, they are rudbeckia, and it looks like Queen Anne's lace. In fact, that's not even rudbeckia, that's I think a coneflower. So anybody who knows better their prairie plants, feel free to put that in the chat, because they're not daisies. But Brian is with us as a great expert and a friend from Great Plains Institute. And this project I know less about, and really looking forward to learning more about solar siting. And this started out with a renewable energy siting campaign, working to align renewable energy goals in a manner that confers co-benefits, like engaging community stakeholders. The state has passed legislation now which kind of redirects that energy in terms of county authorities for siting. And so GPI will tell us about their this initiative and how it's working to work within those parameters to still look at co-benefits and stakeholder engagement. So to introduce Brian real quick in terms of his background. Brian is the vice president at Great Plains Institute and leads the renewable energy market transformation efforts in the Midwest and nationally. He works to identify barriers and solutions to widespread deployment of renewable energy, leads national research efforts on integrating renewable energy with natural systems, and directs GPI liaison work for the National SolSmart Certification Program for local governments. And it sounds like we always just know these people really well, but we ask everybody for an interesting fun fact about themselves. So Mayor Burns can introduce them and sometimes make fun of them, but Brian didn't do that. So if you want to lead with something cool and offbeat about yourself, we'd love to get to know you better.
Oh, gee, yeah, now you're challenging me. Okay, so cool and offbeat. I don't know if I'm cool or offbeat. I'm a zoning geek. That's what I always lead with on these conversations. I get excited about things like addressing zoning issues, and anybody who's talked to me for any length of time will confirm that. I am an urban planner by training, but I've been doing and I've done a lot of urban planning work for both rural communities and as well as cities, but very heavily in the last decade or so in focusing on renewable energy. I will just go ahead and launch into this, and I'm going to try to I'll make this a little bit shorter because I do want to save time for our last presenters. I think the ESG issue is actually dovetails very nicely with the kind of work that we talked about in SolSmart as well as this project. So I'll try to be really brief here. This is the kind of just an introduction to the Midwest Renewable Energy Siting Project, which is focusing on Illinois as a pilot. Okay, go to the next slide. Really, this is a project that is focused on utility and community scale wind and solar energy deployment, and looking to resolve barriers and to come up with consensus best practices and standards for that both help make it more transparent for developers to ramp up their renewable energy efforts, and landowners who are interested in participating to do so, but also to recognize community co-benefits, and that kind of the overriding principle that that host communities for renewable energy development, particularly at the utility scale, should be benefiting from that development. And so as we have seen this rapid ramp up of renewable energy resources, renewable energy development, and recognizing that the Midwest has really remarkable both wind and solar energy resources. If you think of them as your solar and wind energy reserves, in the same way that you would for coal reserves or natural gas reserves, et cetera. There is a lot of people who want to exploit them and take advantage of them because they are an economic resource. And regulators are really searching for those at the local level and state level to kind of resolve land use conflicts that we are seeing between that deployment, renewable energy deployment, and local goals. So we want to try to be able to set predictable and transparent standards on this utility scale development. Okay, next slide. The project is funded by the Crown Family Foundation, which is Illinois based, and we are working with the Nature Conservancy to really launch this initiative focused first on Illinois to engage local and state stakeholders on risks and opportunities of renewable energy development. We want to be able to provide unbiased third-party information to local governments in particular, as well as state governments, and to fill information gaps in science around what the real impacts are. We want to enable mitigation opportunities at the local level and state level to protect community resources, agricultural, economic base, things that are important to the communities, the host communities where these places are going, and to develop some consensus best practices and regulatory consistency. Okay, next slide.
Brian, can I ask you to pause there? We do have a question just on the slides. Could you explain the colors on the maps?
Okay.
Yeah, go back a slide. I think the sun and the wind there.
Yeah. What these maps are showing are the technical potential at the county level for, in this slide, large-scale solar development. It was developed by the National Renewable Energy Lab. You can access this. The citation is down at the bottom. A tool called SLOPE, which stands for State and Local Planning for Energy, and it is a kind of neat tool that identifies a whole variety of things, including allowing you to do some scenario planning for greenhouse gas reduction, trying to make this available to every community in the nation so that nobody is bound by lack of information or lack of technical capacity. But this particular slide is showing kind of what the technical potential is by county for large-scale solar development at the utility scale. And the next slide is showing the same capacity for wind-based
Is dark better?
energy.
Does
And
dark
dark,
mean,
yeah, dark means more resource, more
thank you.
technical potential. Yes, sorry, to be clear. Okay.
Thank
And
you.
obviously you can see that where there is, especially in the case of wind, where you have urban development, you have a lot less wind resource, and where you have more rural areas, you have a lot more, which of course means that a lot of these things are going to be placed, the host communities for these are going to emphasize the rural communities rather than the urban communities where the energy is actually being used. So that is one of the kind of issues that we're trying to kind of resolve as we move forward. Okay, go to the next slide. So there was a American Farmland Trust, AFT, American Farmland Trust, did a workshop. I just wanted to point this out that we kind of launched our program off of last fall, where they convened people around solar and agriculture. And I just wanted to point out that there was a number of specific recommendations that they came up with, trying to kind of resolve some of these issues and that we are moving ahead with kind of implementing some of these as well as other initiatives on large scale solar. I wanted to point out the last bullet point where they specifically identified working with the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus for their and the SolSmart program and the regional planning officers to encourage what they call smart solar, and they have some smart solar guidelines that are consistent with what we're promoting, both in SolSmart as well as more broadly the GPI is working on this issue. Okay, go to the next slide. We did do some assessment of kind of where there were existing and proposed solar developments to kind of allow people to see the land use implications of solar, large scale solar. This is just large scale, anything more than a megawatt, which would be community scale as well as large scale. We looked at existing solar installations and the different kind of capacities, and you can see that there's a lot of counties in Illinois that actually don't have existing solar installations of larger than a megawatt, and then even greater number that have some but very low scales, only up to 250 acres worth of development. We try to translate this into acres rather than use megawatts and things like that. So the 250 acres being obviously pretty small at a county scale. Some communities that are a little more than that in terms of existing installations, but we looked at proposed installations, ones that have asked for interconnection to the regional grid, both in the PJM grid and the MISO grid. And to kind of see where the market was actually looking at in terms of developing resources. So you can kind of see that there's a much greater number of proposed installations than existing installations, including some that are getting into the thousands of acres of deployment, which is where you start to see some land use conflicts. Okay, go to the next slide. We did combine this in terms of kind of the existing and proposed to kind of get a sense of where the market was showing solar development, utility scale development, and kind of, again, we see that even in the proposed realm where there are a tremendous amount of proposed projects in the state of Illinois. Lee County is kind of the heart of it, where there is actually over 10,000 acres of land in proposed developments. In the transmission queue, but most of the counties in Illinois are still looking at a very small amount of acreage being dedicated to solar. Okay, go to the next slide. We then also looked at the ratio because the conflict with farmland is something that has come up as a big issue and a big barrier. We looked at the ratio of farmland in a county to propose solar development in the county by the number of acres, and you can see that the vast majority of counties have actually a very small amount of land that is being proposed to be developed in solar. Only a few that exceed 3% of the total land base. But the more important issue from a land use conflict standpoint is that the higher percentage ratios are all clustered in northern Illinois. Not surprisingly, that's both where the demand is for the energy as well as the transmission access points, which is also the place where farmland is most under threat, as you would talk to the American Farmland Trust people, from other forms of development. And so that this has become a kind of issue in terms of kind of what counties are trying to wrestle with in regard to their economic base and in terms of their land use conflicts. And we want to recognize that this is a picture of solar development and one of the things that we're trying to help resolve as we move forward. Okay, go to the next slide. I'll actually pause here. We do have I had a couple of questions we were going to poll. I don't know if we need to actually do the poll because I want to save time for our other presenters. As Edith had noted, the state of Illinois has changed the siting standards and basically stripped from most counties the ability to do much land use regulation of solar and wind development. It's pretty controversial, especially at the county level. And one of the things that we are doing now as part of this program is trying to work both with the host communities to kind of see where those pressure points still are that they can actually shape solar and wind development under the current legislation to their local priorities, as well as talk to cities who are interested in seeing more renewable energy deployment in order to meet their climate goals, which is what these questions go to, so that there can be some recognition across local governments that there needs to be perhaps some collaboration between the urban areas and the rural areas to make sure that as renewable energy moves forward, there is a co-benefit, to local and host communities. And this kind of ties, if you want to think about it, to the next presenter, the ESG standards of where if you're looking not just at the benefit to your community, but also what the benefits are to the host communities that are citing these facilities. And just kind of, I'm going to close. Go to the next slide.
One minute. I need to skip the poll slides.
The polls. Okay.
They're going to lose their minds. Here we go.
Okay. Yes, and then yes, and go to the next slide too. We are in the process of developing or redeveloping the Illinois model ordinance. We did develop one for the state of Illinois for both distributed scale and utility scale solar deployment in 2020. As a part of this project, we're now going to be updating this, and we want to know from this community, what really are your solar development issues that most critical to your community, specifically from a land use or a zoning standpoint? What are the kind of issues that's most critical that you have sample language or guidance that you can refer to? And then also to ask whether you're interested in participating in a process to shape this next model ordinance, whether that be from the standpoint of distributed scale solar in an urban environment or rural host community standards consistent with the new siting legislation that Illinois has presented. So I'll just put that out there that we are looking for participation, and I want to kind of close here and hand it off to our next presenter so they have some time left at the end of this workshop to get their word in on ESG.
We do have a minute or two if anyone has a question on this. I think particularly just the questions you have up on the slides. So leave it for a second to see if anybody wants to respond to those. And go ahead and raise your hand, or I guess small enough we could just speak up.
Well, these questions or the questions on the solar ordinance.
I think on the solar ordinance might be.
Yeah, if you can go to that slide, Sydney, that'd be great.
Again, any thoughts on those questions or any questions for Brian?
Yeah, and I will note that you actually can go the ordinance that we developed in 2020, which is still probably a good reference point for distributed solar, and as it might relate to the kind of SolSmart standards, still a good thing to do. You can get this on our website, the Great Plains Institute website. We are obviously the utility scale portion of it is out of date now, given the site inflation, but we're in the process of changing that. And we thought we would change the distributed side if people had things that they wanted to be able to see or reference and had questions about solar zoning and permitting standards and co-benefits to their community.
Well, if helpful, we can send these questions out to the committee in a follow-up. We really appreciate it. I just wanted to express my appreciation to Great Plains Institute for reaching out and bringing this issue to our attention and then advocating on behalf of communities and thinking about solar siting in such a thoughtful way. So we may not have questions now, but really do appreciate your participation in this and in Illinois, and then for asking for our opinions. We really appreciate it.
Yes, well, thank you for letting us come and talk to you.
Sure, we do have one quick question. Thought I saw the term bright land used. How is that defined? That's from David Giroux.
Good. Bright fields is actually a concept that has been applied to the deployment of solar on brownfields. So kind of whether that be In Illinois, we are looking at a lot of mineland reclamation areas where there is opportunities to do solar deployment, as well as on closed landfills or other kinds of brownfields that are difficult to develop, but for which they still have solar resources. And so a bright field is the term of art that the EPA has coined some years ago, for that kind of development. And there are some opportunities for communities to specifically look at that. As part of our siting project, we are working with the Nature Conservancy to actually convene a meeting on bright field development, probably later, sometime in the summer. And we would encourage, obviously, we'll let you guys know when that workshop is going to move forward, but to participate in that and bring your kind of issues forward about how you'd like to see that particular form of development occur in your communities.
Thank you, Brian. Really appreciate that. And Cheryl has posed the questions in the chat that are on this slide. So feel free to keep talking about that in the chat. And we're really happy to introduce our next portion of the Environment Committee. And the topic is on ESGs, or environmental, social, and governance. Planning and reporting. ESG is a framework that helps stakeholders manage risks and opportunities related to environmental, social, and governance criteria. ESG uniquely affects local governments, both in terms of material risks and opportunities, because they're responsible for providing essential public services and infrastructure that are directly linked to residents' quality of life. It's really neat to bring this topic, which has been in the news, to municipalities. So we're very excited to be in touch with our next speakers, which are Lisa Bonnet, and both of them come from the College of Business Administration at University of Illinois. And the reason for this timely chat is also that UIC is planning a 2-day course on ESGs, focus on municipal decision makers. And they're here to present information about the course, give you an overview of it, talk about how to get involved, and then most importantly, get some feedback from the Environment Committee. So there's going to be some more questions for you to get involved in this as well. But first, introducing Lisa Bonnet, who's the past director of the Illinois EPA and currently serves as environmental, regulatory, and finance consultant to state and local governments. She was first appointed to the director of IEPA by Governor Pat Quinn in March of 2013, and asked to continue her work as director by former Governor Bruce Rauner in March of 2015. She has led the regulatory team that successfully drafted legislation creating the Illinois Climate Bank, which we might hear about next meeting. And then I'm also pleased to introduce Salva Nadaraja, who is an associate professor of information and decision sciences at the College of Business at the University of Illinois at Chicago. He specializes in reinforcement learning, which is a branch of AI, or artificial intelligence, and applies it to energy, finance, investment, and operations. Salva is the recipient of the 2021 Commodity and Energy Market Association Best Paper Award. First time we've had such an award winner at the Environment Committee. So thank you for that. And the 2020 Informs ENRE Young Researcher Prize for AI to help companies meet renewable energy targets. So this feels like a really exciting stretch for us at the municipal public sector world. So welcome to Salva and Lisa.
Thank you, Edith, for the kind introduction. I want to start off by thanking Mayor Burns, Edith, and Cheryl for the opportunity to speak at this meeting. And I also learned a lot from the previous talk from Brian, Val, and Sydney. That was great. And it really nice dovetails into what we're going to present today. So our game plan in the next 30 to 40 minutes is to cover some background on ESG and how we view it as mattering to municipalities. So this is really going to set a baseline for our discussion, and then we'll jump into the 2-day course that we're trying to put together at UIC. We want to make this presentation interactive and a discussion. So let me kick things off with a poll on how much do you know about ESG? So there's going to be a scale between 1 through 5. 1 if you've not heard about it, and 5 if you're an expert, and everything in between. So I'm going to launch the poll now. Please take a minute to respond. So you should be seeing the poll on your end. And if you could please click on a scale between 1 to 5. Yeah, I'll give it another few seconds here. Okay, I don't think the responses are moving any further, so let me show you the results. So we have a pretty diverse mix. Looks like the majority, 38% are here to learn, 5% of experts, and everything in between. So I think it's a good time for me to sort of jump into what is ESG, building on what Edith said, and then set the tone for what's going to come. So the way we think about ESG is that it's a framework that shines a spotlight on the non-financial impacts of operations, investments, and day-to-day activities. So I say shines a spotlight because, of course, ESG also takes into account traditional risk and financial impact modeling that every organization performs, but it does emphasize the non-financial aspects, which is what makes it unique. So you can see in the slide, there are 3 pillars to ESG, and it's an acronym of the pillars: environment, social, and governance. And it's often viewed through the lens of risk, which I must say I'm pretty biased. I like that view of ESG, just because my research and teaching revolves around risk management. When I teach my MBA class on risk, one of the things I try to keep in mind is sometimes when you talk about ESG, it can be a pretty downer. You always talk about downside, but there's a lot of upside and opportunity to ESG as well. So this is really nicely summarized in this quote by Theodore Roosevelt. So he says, risk is like fire. If controlled, it'll help you. If uncontrolled, it'll rise up and destroy you. So that's sort of our perspective on ESG, is that we want to get ahead of this because it does present long-term benefits. So it's that balanced view I'll take in the rest of the presentation, and that's also a perspective on the course. One thing I do want to point out is even though there are 3 distinct pillars, E, S, and G, they do intersect quite a bit and they reinforce each other. So let me give you a couple of examples before turning over the presentation to Lisa. So we look at the environmental pillar, the E pillar. Some of the things that we've already heard about around decarbonization, greenhouse gas emissions reductions to meet net zero targets. So clearly that's an environmental factor, but it also affects health of the communities. And so that also has social implications. I moved to the western suburbs a couple of years ago. So I live in sort of the Woodridge, Naperville, Lyle area. And I've really come to enjoy the parks, the trails, and the beautiful habitats that we have. So preserving them is, of course, an environmental factor, but then it has a clear impact on how the community engages with municipal services that are provided. So there is this neat link between environmental and social, the social pillars of ESG. And then there's governance. That's sort of the foundation on which everything builds on. And so one way of thinking about it is that it's the structure that allows you to make timely and high quality decisions regarding ESG factors. And so that includes, sound financial planning, ethics and transparency, all the things that we care about when we think about governance, but also certain things that have come to the frontier that even the other speakers spoke about. One of the things is data, right? It's data and cybersecurity. How do you collect data, and how do you protect the data that we've collected from our different stakeholders? The other thing is, one thing that I personally care about a lot is how do you leverage technology and AI for planning around ESG? I'm very bullish on that. I think it's going to have a big impact on how we move forward with ESG. So for one concrete example is that we're trying to set renewable targets on how do we decarbonize and meet net zero. And in order to achieve them in a low-cost manner, I think technology and AI can play a big role, data and so on how you actually do it. And the second thing from a governance standpoint is not only specific processes, but also having a governance structure so you can stay ahead of technology and figure out how to incorporate it as technology and AI and other things impact what we do. So with that high-level baseline of what is ESG, let me pass the baton to Lisa to comment on the relevance of ESG to municipalities. Lisa?
Thank you, Silva. Oh, one too many. All right, so why is ESG important to municipalities? Well, the first reason is municipalities are really responsible for several functions that directly relate to ESG. For example, public infrastructure impacts the environment. Municipalities are responsible for providing essential services to their residents, and they're expected to have an efficient and effective governance. Another reason that ESG is important to municipalities is, unlike businesses, Municipalities cannot relocate or easily diversify their ESG risk in these areas. You really have no choice except to step forward and to find that path and those solutions and to provide a sustainable community for your residents. But probably most important, and the real reason we're here, is that stakeholder expectations around ESG have increased. And I think we're seeing that by community involvement in environmental and social issues inside our municipalities. We're seeing it in purchasing decisions by consumers who are looking for their companies to be environment and socially conscious. And we're certainly seeing it in the municipal and private bond markets from investors who are adopting their own environmental and social goals and are looking to fund projects that help them meet those objectives. So part of the work that Silva and I did is we began thinking about how to integrate ESG into municipality organizations as we looked at the literature and sort of what was happening on ESG in Illinois. And we found an article that was a collaboration between the Illinois Municipal League and the University of Illinois in Springfield that looked at the number of municipalities that have adopted a climate action plan or sustainability plan from 2008 to 2022. And what they found through their research was that 30 municipalities have adopted a sustainability plan or a climate action plan, with Chicago and Evanston sort of being the pioneers in 2008. And as you can see from the slide in the statistics here, 50% of those municipalities with plans are with populations really greater than 100,000, which probably directly sort of relates to the resources and the budget necessary to undertake the exercise. The other data point that we found interesting in this article was the participation in ESG networks by municipalities. And of course, the standout and, so the reason why we're, very honored to be able to talk to you today is the Greenest Region Compact, of where 149 communities have adopted resolutions to achieve the 49 goals. And so certainly in this article and through the research, that was the sort of premier action and the commitments that were being made. And you can see from the slide, there's other communities that have taken pledges and are, working with various organizations. But really, the data that we see here and the thing that was, sort of telling to Silva and I as we looked at this as well, there are tons of actions going on. Communities are standing up, taking the goals, and making the commitments, but they're really doing so without a publicly available sustainability plan for doing so. And really a sustainability plan, really identifies the priorities. It provides for an agreed upon resource plan to undertake those activities. And it defines the communication plan to really shine and show the activities and how you'll communicate that to your stakeholders. And that's part of what this course will do. Okay, so I don't know, but I'm not moving.
I think it's working, Lisa.
All right, thank you. All right, so when Silva and I were talking, we were like, okay, so, how does Illinois gain leadership in ESG and how do we get them there? And we truly believe from the research that we've done and the success that we've seen in other states or within the private sector, that we need to increase the number of municipalities that have sustainability plans. And on top of that, we need to really reduce the barriers for small municipalities to create this plan, because as you saw from the prior statistic, it's really, communities with greater populations that have the resources to undertake this. But as the communities in the Greenest Region Compact know, that really environmental and social issues are not nicely contained within city boundaries. And that when municipalities come together to address these issues and to provide a sustainable community, we do so efficiently and effectively, and it's, a win for everyone. So how do we get there? Well, we truly believe that we need to internalize the value proposition for sustainability. and that we really need to provide the resources so that communities can create sustainability plans, so that they can put their path forward and have their implementation and be able to report it and really take credit for the work they're doing, and to gain that support from the stakeholders and their residents. And we need to reduce the barriers and the burdens to doing that. And the course will provide a efficient process and a template for doing that. And then we need to share best practices and guidelines, because there's a lot of work that is going on, including in your own communities on this. And that's what this course will do. It will provide a forum for the participants to really network with their peers and talk about what works and doesn't work. They'll be able to hear from industry experts and what is going on in the ESG space and how to utilize that information. So adopting ESG into the organization also provides an opportunity for increased impact and visibility. You know, we talk about the great work that's going on in the Greenest Region Compact, and that you've adopted 49 ESG related goals and metrics. But when you look at the standardized frameworks and reporting that are in the ESG sector, we don't find Illinois communities being mentioned or really shining for the work that they're doing. For example, the Carbon Disclosure Project, only 2 Illinois communities appeared on their A list, which are sort of their, the highest ranking. They do a ranking for their A list between 2018 and 2022, and that was Evanston and the Village of Park Forest. And in all, only 7 Illinois cities and 5 organizations reported into the CDP in 2022. So again, a lot of work going on, but yet not being accounted for in the standard, don't know why I can't move. So in these sort of standard formatting problems. So, sort of how do we get there? Well, by understanding the reporting landscape and standards, and that's what this course is to do. There are prominent sort of standards and frameworks that are being used across the globe and the United States to really accumulate the work that is being undertaken, and how it is meeting the outcomes and the metrics that have been set. And we're going to provide the tools for you to do that, and to show you how to quickly align your data to work within those frameworks, and to evaluate the frameworks so it best fits with your sustainability strategy.
Lisa, did you want me to launch the polls now?
Oh, yes, please do.
Okay. So we're going to launch 2 polls. One is just to find out from the audience if you have a publicly available sustainability plan. So I'm launching that poll right now. You should see it. Okay, so we wait a few more seconds. I think we have, so let me share the results. So you can see it. So about 45% of the respondents, there were 22 respondents, 45% said yes, 36% no, and 18% working on it now. So it roughly follows the distribution that Lisa showed. So that's good to know. And we want to ask you one more question on reporting. Let me put that up as well, just to get a sense of whether you're following any reporting standards. So do you currently follow any ESG reporting standards? There are a bunch that I've included here, but doesn't necessarily have to be those standards, but any other standards would be fine too. Okay, so let me end the poll here and share the results. So here we have most of the audience are either unsure, they do not follow a reporting standard. There's one participant that follows a reporting standard. Could I find out what that standard is? If whoever said yes could just tell us what that standard is. Oh, that's Edith. Okay. I did note.
I
notice
didn't
that-
answer the poll actually, Salva, because so that wasn't me. I just
Oh, no, and
added,
you- Okay.
yeah,
so
I just added the CDP reporting, but if someone else.
I did not notice that. We should have mentioned that. We didn't notice the Metropolitan Mayor's
Mhm.
Caucus. That's awesome.
Yeah, no, I can't answer the poll. So whoever said yes, you're reporting, please. Please speak up. Carrie Malfeo from Park Forest.
Oh, wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. So I think that's useful information that we'll definitely keep in mind as we go ahead. Lisa, do you want to continue?
Okay. Okay, and so finally, another reason for integrating ESG into the organization is to attract investment. And I think, we hear and, certainly in the news and in the literature that the green bond market has been growing over the last several years. And again, back to, and point that's because investors are taking their own commitments and reaching their own climate goals. And so in the United States in 2020, $15 billion were issued by local governments for green bonds. For Illinois, by mid-2021, there were 6 green bond issues for totaling $1.4 billion. Now, $950 million of that was the 2 green bond issues that the Illinois Finance Authority did in 2019 and 2020 on behalf of the IEPA's SRF program. But we also saw green bond issues by like MWRD and the Chicago Public Schools. But again, just as this work is going on and Illinois is taking these efforts, we don't find this data in the ICMA database, which the ICMA is the International Capital Market Association, and they're the primary standard of the green bond market, and have issued the green bond principles for both the green bond market and the social bond market. So again, how do we get there? Well, by understanding the 4 core principles of the green bond principles and what investors are expecting in the ESG municipal bond market. And we'll take that, the course will provide the tools so that you can understand those principles and develop a green bond framework that integrates with your sustainability strategy that can be used in an official offering to show you how governments basically currently meet those objectives. When we looked at the databases of bonds being issued, we found that for the project, the environmental and social projects, that most municipalities projects would have met the green bond or the social bond principles. And so what we want to do is be able to give you what those are and show you how your projects meet that and how you can articulate that in a green bond framework. So with that, I will also say, just to segue back to Silva, that this is actually how Silva and I's adventure started, is that I was fresh off of leading the 2019 and 2020 green bond issues for the Illinois Finance Authority. And Silva and I connected through a colleague, and I was very excited of what the green bond market was providing and what it really could do for municipalities and lowering their cost of capital, but really also the intrinsic values of ESG and the predominance of work that's happening really falls within the purview of municipalities. So with that, I will turn it over to Silva, and he will talk about the course and the university.
Yeah, sure. Lisa, there's a question on chat
Oh,
that asks,
okay.
can green bonds be issued for urban resiliency that is burying electric power lines? It's from David Jurina.
Yes, I mean, if you really look at the categories of green bonds and the projects that are eligible, it's very broad to take in new technologies and to take in varying projects. So I believe, yes, you could label that as a green bond. I think we also have another poll question, Silva, here.
Yeah, so I'm going to launch that poll question. This is about whether you're considering previously considered a green or social bond issue. I've just launched the poll. Let's wait a few seconds more. Let me share the results here. Okay, so we have, again, there's one respondent who's considering or considered issuing a green bond, and the rest, 94% say no. Should I guess that it's Park Forest? Is there someone else? Could you please either let us know or mention on chat who responded yes, and what the green bond issue was regarding?
We're a small enough group. If you want to come off mic and respond, that's fine too. Unmute yourself.
Yeah.
I think it's also interesting. Is it no because you're not going to market, or is it no because you don't want to undertake, the labeling of a bond? So I'm not saying we do another poll, but I find that question interesting.
We've never thought about that, but again, if you've answered no, please respond. This is a good time to share what you know.
Yeah, if any thoughts come up, please, then you can include it in the chat. I'll keep moving in the interest of time. So, Lisa mentioned how our collaboration got started, and I just wanted to give some context on why we're launching educational efforts in ESG. The premise behind these efforts are that UIC can partner with municipalities to reduce some of the barriers for municipalities to participate in the ESG space. And one of the reasons for that is ESG as a framework and as just understanding of ESG is changing rapidly over time. And so that's why we think we can sort of bring our research infrastructure at the university to support our teaching mission. And in addition to the 2-day course that we'll expand on and elaborate on in a minute, we're also trying to plan an ESG certificate that will be multiple courses geared towards ESG. I've prepared a few slides about UIC business. I suspect most of you know about the University of Illinois at Chicago, but you may not know the college. That's mostly for offline viewing in the interest of time. But let me tell you a few things about the business school that may be of interest to you. So one thing is we are a growing and diverse college in terms of our student body. And in terms of teaching, one of the things I really, really enjoy is that 38% of our students are first generation college students. So that's really great in terms of having an impact on the communities. We have the traditional, bachelor's, master's, PhD degree programs. What's relevant to what we're trying to do in the ESG space is really around micro-credentials. So shorter educational programs that are geared towards a specific emerging area that someone can come in for 2 days, learn something and put it into action immediately. So that's where the ESG workshop falls under. And that's, again, fueled by a lot of the research that goes on at the university. So we have research centers around analytics and data, supply chain management, leadership, and finance. And this year, we launched a new office at the College of Business, specifically focused on community engagement. We call that BASE, or the Office of Business Alumni and Community Engagement. And so that's really geared towards supporting initiatives like this ESG education course around micro-credentials that would be relevant to the community. So with that said, what is this workshop about? It's a 2-day event. We want your feedback on whether you would like it to be virtual or in person. We're thinking about downtown Chicago versus online, and I'll try to launch a poll regarding that. The workshop is not only focused on training. Given the evolving nature of ESG, we think there needs to be sort of a forum for municipal decision makers to exchange ideas, right? And so that's part of the goal of this workshop. And it revolves around 3 modules. There'll be UIC instructors and also guest speakers from industry. The first module is on integrating ESG policies and processes in the organization. Second will be on ESG reporting, and the last will be on ESG financing. So I'll pass it on to Lisa to elaborate on the first module. Lisa. Lisa, I think you're muted. Lisa, you're still muted. I
Yeah,
think.
we can't hear you.
We can't hear you.
Okay, there. All right, I'm sorry. Obviously, all problems are related to me, not Silva. Okay, so back to module 1. So module 1, we're going to explore, governance and making sure that we have the best foundation in order to be successful and to meet the indicators and the outcomes in our sustainability strategy. And so we're going to step through, sort of a framework of looking at participants will explore this framework to look at, core government functions such as budgeting, hiring, your processes and plans, and, really looking at the foundation in order to be successful in implementing and creating your sustainability strategy and being able to effectively communicate that to the public. Module 1 will also look at creating a sustainability strategy. And we've got this 5-step process, which will allow you to very efficiently and effectively walk through to integrating ESG into your vision and mission statement, to identifying your priorities, to setting targets and really focusing on those key performance indicators and outcomes. I think one thing municipalities struggle with is there's so much on the plate to do, and we've adopted all of these goals and outcomes and strive to meet them. But in practicality, with the budgets and the resources that you have to, we need to get those targeted. And this process allows you to set those priorities, to engage with stakeholders, and to set those targets and the priorities. And then it provides you with a roadmap to really implementing and moving forward. And so, participants will really work through this 5-step process in order to sort of integrate ESG into the organization, to set those priorities and understand how to evaluate those, the issues at hand to be looked at, to identify the priorities that have the greatest impact and have the best outcome for the stakeholders and meet those expectations, and then how to report that so that really your good work shines and it's accumulated by these sort of standard reporting where we look at the work that's being done and are we collectively meeting our goals.
Yeah, the next part of module 1 is on risk management. So whenever I hear the word risk, I pop up. I think along with creating a sustainability strategy, you need to set things up for quantification and measurement. So this is where I think risk management or the perspective of risk really comes in naturally. First step in this part of the module is to identify risks itself, like do a tally of all the risks. The typical way this is done in practice around ESG is what's called a materiality assessment. So you would look at what risks affect your organization's performance, and that includes ESG factors. But there's a slight twist when you think about ESG. So there's a two-way materiality effect. So one is, how do ESG factors affect your performance? And then how do your operations and investments affect ESG factors? And so that really becomes a double materiality assessment. And that's what we'll discuss in this part of the module. And once that's done, then we'll get into sort of the different types of risk mitigation strategies. How do you accept risk, avoid risk, transfer risk, and so on. And all of this falls into the umbrella of risk preparation. On top of that, we'll discuss a risk management process that places emphasis on risk discovery and risk recovery, which I think doesn't get as much love as risk preparation. So risk discovery has to do with trying to find out the fastest way to detect the risk once it's impending and start initiating sort of your communication and operations processes to address it once the risk actually occurs. So for instance, if you have a weather event that's coming up, maybe you need to subscribe to a service that would give you that information sooner than the public, and then initiate sort of your operational processes to get them ready to be executed as soon as the event occurs. And the last part would be risk recovery, which is actual implementation. So we'll go through this whole process. And the idea is to create a template for you to do the materiality assessment and change your risk plans if needed to account for ESG factors. And here again, segueing into what I think Brian mentioned, or maybe it was Sydney, around data. We think data is going to be a challenge here, right? So you need data to be able to quantify things in an efficient manner, in a resource efficient manner is key. And that's something that we'll focus on. And there's been a lot more data that's become available over the last few years. And so what are those databases? How do we leverage them to do these assessments is something that we'll also focus on in this part of the module. That's module 1, and that'll set us up in terms of sustainability strategy. And that leads to module 2, which will focus on tracking and reporting on your progress. And this can be done in a meaningful manner once you have the sustainability strategy in place. I'm sure most of you have heard from the popular press and the media that tracking and reporting expectations have increased, and there are also mandates in Europe around reporting. There are discussions in the SEC right now on such reporting rules. I know there are reporting rules around on state and federal governments as well. So one challenge here is that there are many reporting frameworks. All of them have their strengths, and following all of them can be overwhelming, and it can take a lot of resources to do it. And so really our view here is that you should know the frameworks, but there's a lot that needs to be prioritized to do things efficiently. So you need to think big and be selective on what are the goals and KPIs that you want to follow that would accelerate your progress towards the sustainability goals that you think are important, as opposed to trying to follow all of them. And what we found, just doing a survey of the sustainability reports and the goals that different municipalities have put forth, is there's a lot of progress towards aligning with national and international standards, but current participation is very low, as also we're seeing from the polls. So the question is, how do we come up with actionable guidelines to align our tracking and reporting with these national standards? And how can we create visibility for some of the great work that's going on in Illinois? Lisa?
All right, and so the third module will explore ESG financing best practices, and we'll look at the ESG municipal bond market. And as we talked about this, my participation with the SRF green bond issues really showed the opportunities in the green bond market. The 2020 issue that IFA did, we actually attracted 19 new investors. In 2019, we attracted 13 new investors. In 2020, we upped our game. We included key performance indicators. We very much followed the green bond principles. We agreed to reporting that was already done by IEPA, which is the great thing about municipalities. Most of what the expectations are, you're already undertaking. But as we all know, in the green bond market, or in any bond market, when there's more investors, there's more demand for your bonds, they're willing to pay more, and therefore you pay less interest. And in the 2020 issue, for the SRF program, we really had the lowest total interest costs, true interest costs that we've had on any of the leverage programs. So we truly believed in the green bond designation, brought those investors in. We were twice oversubscribed to the number of bonds that were being sold. And so I really hope that part of the course is to really give municipalities the confidence to go into the green bond or social bond market, because you're really doing the work, and you just need the framework, and participants will learn about the green bond principles and how to put together a green bond framework that can be used in a labeled bond offering, and we'll show you how to really take credit for all the programs and the processes that you have in place. And so, we want to give you the confidence to get that lower cost of capital, because we know that environmental and social investments by municipalities are really expensive. And so I do think, the green bond market and the social bond market will provide that price differential, and it's on the cusp of doing that. And so the course will give the participants confidence to enter that market. All right, so that is the end of the presentation that I have. Silva, if you'd like to offer any last comments here.
Yes, just a couple of things. We wanted to launch a poll about the workshop itself to get your preferences on, whether you'd be interested, what mode of instruction do you want it in person or virtual, what time frame might work for you, and would you be interested in a certificate? So if you could take place a few seconds to respond to the poll that I just launched. And so while that's happening, so there is a comment on chat from Ivy Clee saying, I agree with Dave, this is not something I explored at Kane County. Currently grant funding. So grant funding is sort of the path to fund projects. And Lisa, I remember we had this discussion maybe like a week or two ago about when we heard from the Chicago Department of Public Health, I think someone about grant funding versus green bonds. And I don't know, you shared some insights around how there's like a pot of money that there's some grant money that sort of initiates the green bonds. Do you want to comment on that?
Right. Well, in the scenario that Silva's talking about, it's kind of like the SRF, where there's a pot of federal money, like a capitalization grant that comes to an entity, and then that entity, loans the grant money out, and then as that money is paid back, that is used to leverage bonds and to pay for interest cost on bonds. So a lot of times a grant project that may have partial grant money and partial financing money can still be considered a green bond designation. I will also say that ESG and green bond designations is also important on a lot of the federal grant programs, as they really are looking for how these projects meet their own environmental or social objectives and their own plans. And so a lot of the federal notifications are requiring you to make statements on how your projects meet these ESG goals or outcomes. So I think ESG is applicable on the grant side, whether it's total giveaway free money, which we all love, or whether it's sort of being the foundation of a financing program. Did that help?
Thanks, Lisa. Ivy and Dave, I don't know if that helped with that exchange, but thank you, Lisa. So I think we're almost out of time. So I just want to mention that we do welcome involvement from municipal experts with ESG experience. So please do reach out to us. And if you have any other questions about the workshop, our email IDs are here, and you can send any broader engagement questions to our Office of Community Engagement. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Selva and Lisa. A really fascinating presentation, and look forward to more conversations about this and the course being offered. We certainly will share that information. All the slides will, of course, be on the Environment Committee page, and the recording, link to the recording after this meeting. Next session, we had planned one topic, but I think I'm going to sneak in another one. You may have heard of the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant, which is EPA's funding, US EPA's funding for climate planning at a regional level. We're really pleased to have the foundational climate action plan for the region to build on that. So we'll have guests from US EPA talking about that national investment for both states and for large metropolitan statistical areas, including the Chicago metro region. And then we will add in on a somewhat related topic is the Climate Bank, which Lisa talked about, and we'll have her former colleague, Chris Meister, join us, scheduling permitting. So to everyone, thank you for being here. Please do follow up with questions or comments, and have a great week. Thank you.
Thank you.